Which one do you think that they're going to side with? So I'm going to say this: the situation in Ukraine is actually a lot worse than I thought it was. I know people have been saying, like, Argent, you've been saying Russia's going to win for months now. But if you look back to the beginning, I thought Russia was completely floundering. And prior to the spring, summer, winter, fall offensive, I actually thought that they would make some progress. I didn't think that they would reach the Sea of Azov. I didn't think they'd reach Crimea, but I thought that they had got enough firepower, tanks, etc., together, and enough reserves that if they hit certain points um, in the line, they would have been able to make at least local breakthroughs. Like that, overall, the thing would have been a disaster. But if we look to kind of the one that I think is the most comparable, which was the German Spring Offensive, ultimately it was a disaster and they failed, but they did manage to make large territorial gains. It just increased the front and it gave them a bunch of salience. That is not the case in terms of what is happening with Ukraine. Let me just find that source. Sorry, I'm just trying to find a. Okay, I'll look for that while I'm talking. Um, this year, Russia's actually made territorial gains. So the big throw of the die didn't work out. And as bad as things like were going, it's kind of getting exponentially worse because on top of all of this, they can't rely on the same amount of um, support that they previously had. Like it was already kind of getting iffy. It was already kind of going downhill. The various, let's see here. Let's see here. Let me just look at the cached version. Where's the cached version? Okay, here we go. So if we look down at this, so according to the New York Times, no one gained any ground in Ukraine this year. Nobody. If we look at the changes, we'll see that since the start of the spring offensive, Russia's actually gained more net territory. Um, is the Ukraine offensive began here and it's just completely flat. And if we look down here, this is a very small amount of territory, but the fact is that Russia gained more. Um, so they're saying it's smaller than Kiev and New York City, which I understand is true, but this is after like an all-in YOLO offensive. So I thought it was gonna like have some impact. I thought it was gonna break through lines in a couple of places and maybe do some damage to the Russians, but it was a bigger failure than I think anybody was really expecting. Now, an interesting thing, and we'll get to the budget in a minute, but so Russia has not had to rely on conscription anymore. Um, at this point in time, it looks like they're going to have 400,000 volunteers by the end of the year. Uh, this is due to a number of things. Some of it is legitimate, some of it is kind of bureaucratic finagling. Now, on the one hand, Russia has increased the financial incentives greatly for men entering the army. So, in a lot of cases, it's better to join the army than to get a low level civilian job. They've also had a very aggressive recruitment campaign stressing people looking for meaning in life, service to the motherland, stuff like that. And they have had a lot of success. And every indication I've seen is they have had a steady stream of people volunteering. A lot of this, though, is conscripts who signed up for service, like who finished their term and decided to sign on as regular soldiers. Now you can say that's because they wanted to pursue a career in the military or they were kind of pressured into it. I'm not really sure. I'm not going to make a judgment on that. So it's not as if it's 400,000 like complete civilians signed up to the army. But the point is that at this point in time, Russia, however you want to do um, the math, had recruited 400,000 volunteers. Now, if we look at the statistics at the moment, Russia, if we assume Russia recruited the 400,000, Russia's like recruited in like the last year the equivalent of what Ukraine has as its total armed forces. And once again, Russia has a much larger manpower reserve. So we have a failed offensive, and they're starting to get kind of desperate. So this, I'm going to say, is one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. So, uh, pregnant women have started to volunteer. I don't know how common this is, or this is just a publicity stunt, but they've created a specialized uniform for women up to 7 months into their pregnancies. Now, they are not fighting on the front lines. I should make that very clear. There was a fake news story that some like pro Russia people were putting out that Ukraine had started conscripting women. That's not exactly true. They've drafted women with medical training uh, to serve in rear roles in the army, which seems perfectly reasonable to me. As far as I can tell, they are not like resorting to mass conscription of women to send them to the front lines. That is quite possible, though. So we have this. We have the women volunteering with the wartime pregnancies, which I just find completely disgusting. When a soldier finds out she's pregnant, she immediately removed from any combat roles. Though she said the sniper first hid her pregnancy for nearly 3 months as she sought to continue her frontline duties. Like that's fucked. I don't even like know what to say about it. And once again, we're saying that like Ukraine is winning, that it's winning, that Russia's out of manpower, and this insane shit's happening. We also have this. Ukraine is rolling out lighter, form-fitting body armor for women. Soldiers said wearing men's clothes get in the way of their frontline fighting. Now, you might go, wow, this is really cool, but then you start to wonder, why is it lighter? I guess on one way you could argue that women are smaller, so they could probably make the thing smaller, but with a similar thickness. But I don't really know how you make armor, well, I mean, through technological advancement, but if it's made of the same kind of protective materials that male armor is, it being thinner and lighter means it's less resistant to damage. So we have the new bulletproof vests that cost $1,300 each. They do not have protection for women. It poses a health risk to them, and psychologically, women do not feel protected. They are forced to wear men's bulletproof vests that do not fit snugly. The new armor solves the chafing and discomfort that flat armored chest plates pose for women on the battlefield, per Ukrainian armor. There's no anatomical curve in a man's bulletproof vest, so we need like bikini armor, I guess. So women have a chest opening a large area of damage. Um, that's cool. So that is the direction we're moving in. Once again, it is fake news to say that there is some sort of mass conscription of women, but it is heading in that direction. Possibly. We also have Ukraine has expanded the conscription list. Oh, did they take it down? Or did I just copy and paste this? I think I just copied and pasted this wrong. Okay. So the defense ministry in the Ukraine has amended rules exempting Ukrainians from mobilizing on health grounds. So they're getting rid of a lot of the medical conditions that previously prevented people from serving in the army. Most armies have some sort of physical requirements. I'm not sure if there's still a height or weight requirement to serve in the army, but like during World War One, as they ran out of manpower, they kept lowering the requirements. So they've expanded it so now it includes people with clinically cured diseases, HIV positive but asymptomatic, some mental illnesses, slowly progressive diseases of the nervous system, and stuff like that. So they are expanding conscription. Some of this is probably like honestly like not that big a deal, but I think it's the fact that we have all these things going in a particular direction. We have a failed counteroffensive that lost immense amounts of manpower. We have this weird stuff going on with women, and we have this expansion of the people who can be conscripted. So I'm just going to, before we get into the budget, I'm just going to take a look at the chat and say what the chat is saying. Okay, Later Gator says most Jews think it was cringe. Let's see here. Let's see. Rooster God says NYT published a hit piece on Zelensky yesterday. Looks like the U.S. is getting ready to dump him. Heard it said Russia is building Khazaria for Jews as a fallback in Ukraine. Hey, Argent, you moving to Russia? No, I'm a Canadian. Stop showing Ukraine roasties. Russia doesn't care about ground. Yes, it is an attritional war. Let's see here. Uh, in order for Ukraine to start needing to conscript women, Ukrainian casualties would need to be in the tens of millions of fighting age males. Logic that right wing NPCs are too retarded for. I mean, I didn't say they were fully conscripting women. I think the issue is I'm trying to remember where the report was. Ukraine's population has declined a lot. It's declined by a lot actually. I'm just trying to find where it is. I saw somewhere that it was up to like uh okay, so Ukraine's population is currently around, let me just see where it is. I'm just trying to find it. So millions of men left. Okay, so let's go over this. So this is Reuters. We can pretend that Reuters is some sort of like far right, insane, pro Russian news source. So Ukraine at the start of the war uh, had a roughly, I think its population probably declined somewhat. If we want to include Crimea being lost, Lukansk and Donbass and the other republic being lost, and general population decline as a result of mass immigration away from Ukraine and a low birth rate, we'll say it was at about 44 million when this war started. I think that's fair. Amidst that, we also have large sections of the Crimea of the country that have been occupied and annexed by Russia. We have immense numbers of men who have fled. And so some demographers have suggested that it could be as low as 30 million now. So the country may, so the population controlled by the government may have shrunk to 30 million from probably around 40 to 44 million at the start of the war. Now, I'm not sure proportionally who it was mainly who fled. If it was mostly young military age males, then the demographic crisis is actually a lot worse than that. And a lot of these countries kind of have an inverted age pyramid because they underwent such massive population birth rate falls in the 80s and 90s. So I'm not saying that Ukraine needs to fully conscript women. I'm just saying that we have to keep in mind that this is not the nation of 40 million with all the reserves and male manpower that we had at the start of the war. So also keep in mind you can't draft the entirety of a country's population. Once you reach a certain point, so much of the working age population starts to get into the army that it affects the ability of the civilian economy. Because keep in mind, every like 100,000 Ukrainians who go into the army is 100,000 less people who's working in the civilian economy. This is something that happened during the World War II, actually. See, Russia had a very unproductive agricultural sector compared to the West. They didn't have very many tractors or combines or stuff like that, and they were very heavily dependent upon manpower. Now, once the war started and they started drafting tens of millions of peasants, there was just a chronic shortage. The farms weren't working properly. Um, they weren't able to harvest. They weren't able to plant, and it got worse as time went on. And to a certain extent, the U.S. shipping Russia a bunch of food kind of helped them out a lot during the dark days of the war because Ukraine was under occupation by Germany, and a lot of the rest of Russia